All right, so our third video, as we continue to look back over the executive branch of the federal government, we get into foreign policy. Foreign policy, again, is a major component of the president's role as the chief diplomat of the United States of America. As we recognize, foreign policy is where the president handles the interactions with other countries and states. Part of their candidacy is to explain to the American people how they plan on working with other countries of the world. That includes both allies and enemies. Some of the major goals that a president should focus on in their foreign policy is, of course, national security. The United States will, of course, recognize itself as a major contributor to global security, and with global security often comes the heavy responsibility of enforcing global law. That includes going into conflicts and settling issues between multiple states or with the United States and other countries. Another key part that connects to foreign policy, which does in a way make the president again a chief economic leader, is international trade. The president's key goal here with foreign policy is to make sure that the United States is working sufficiently with other countries as trade partners and to ensure that with safe and protected trade, the country of the United States will see an increase in its wealth, as well as the increase of wealth for those other trade partners. Ultimately, again, though, with national security comes the sort of benefit of world peace, which is a common goal hopefully most, if not all, countries will work towards. Lastly, we recognize the president's key goal here is to expand the practices of democracy. We want to see that other countries are able to enjoy the same civil liberties and freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States as citizens, and we hope to protect those people who are not being heard or listened to by their government and enact a democratic practice in their government. Now, we recognize that to do this, the president is serving as a member of a larger system of individuals and agents who basically make foreign policy a reality. We call this simple structure a bureaucratic system. In a bureaucratic system, we typically look at this as a chain of command, and there are high-ranking officials all the way down to lower-level individuals who make sure that all federal policies and actions take place appropriately. People who work in those specific positions are often just referred to as bureaucrats. However, it is more important to recognize them by their department position instead. Now, as we examine the federal bureaucratic system, we recognize again that the chief job of the president is to enforce all federal legislation or laws. However, that also includes overseeing the White House, the executive branch, and all of the agents and advisors who work there, and just make sure that everything is working smoothly and appropriately. This, of course, connects to the federal policy bureaucratic system. In the foreign policy bureaucratic system, there are specific groups and very important individuals who help maintain a consistent and very safe foreign policy for the president. Some of those critical departments that we look at would be, of course, the State Department, which represents the entire United States abroad, the Central Intelligence Agency, which works to gather intelligence and information on both issues going on inside, but more importantly, outside of the United States, the Defense Department, which of course is run by the Secretary of Defense that oversees the entire military and all of our branches of military, and then the National Security Council, which we discussed in our previous video. As far as foreign policy is concerned, the president does have a series of tools, or I guess I should say abilities, to make sure that foreign policy is carried out effectively. First and foremost, the president is able to go into official treaty making with other leaders of other countries. And this goes back to the idea of executive agreements. The president may enter into agreements with other leaders to establish alliances with other countries. And not just, again, for one or two countries, but hopefully the entire world, or major regions of the world. We can recognize again that through executive agents and agreements, the president does not have to have senatorial approval. The president may do this as quickly as possible to ensure peace is brokered. Such an example would be NATO. NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, works as a major military alliance for all major countries connected to the Atlantic Ocean. During the Cold War, we recognize NATO became a major military branch that worked effectively against the Soviet Union and all of its Warsaw Pact countries. which basically established a Soviet communist military alliance. So NATO works as, again, a major military connection for democratic states. The president can also, under foreign policy powers, appoint ambassadors. Again, this is also a position or perk given to the president as chief executive. Again, the president must oversee all agents and their agencies are working smoothly. Sometimes the president will need to appoint more ambassadors to go in and represent America during critical times of need, or just make sure that ambassadors are working effectively for the best interest of all Americans and the world. Some other critical tools that we recognize in foreign policy is that the president is able to issue foreign aid. And foreign aid usually can serve in the practice of actual money or through food, leadership, advisement, medical supplies, anything that an area might need in their times of need itself. Such an example that we put forth would be Pakistan, which has received a lot of aid and support, even though there has been some increased military interaction, just because, again, when people are given help, oftentimes people are willing to look at those areas that gave help in a favorable way. And this promotes peace because then there's no more need for conflict. We can also recognize that as an economic leader, through foreign policy, the president is able to influence international business and trade through specific rules and even punishments. As we do business with other countries, the president does have the best interest of all of our citizens in mind with how we obtain resources and the business we conduct with other countries. The president can issue or push for the issuance of trade sanctions, which in a way are almost like punishments or consequences for unfavorable acts that a country might be doing. Such examples of trade sanctions could include tariffs, where we impose extra taxes on specific resources coming and going between the United States and that country. Or the president might push for a formal embargo where we simply cut off trade and business with that given country, which means they will have to get their resources elsewhere. Of course, the president is also able to use the military to enforce or to push foreign policy, which we of course recognize. We've been in conflict for very many long numbers of decades, and the military again is used to, in many cases, use force to promote peace. That's it for today when we examine here the tools of foreign policy. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thank you.